So around 1997, the IRM began to move forward. The IRM was the ISKCON reform movement, headed up by Krishna Kanta, and he had an assistant named Yadu Raj. And they came to Los Angeles to meet with myself and Yasodanandan and some of the other people who had been spearheading the idea, the Prabhupada Nuga idea. You know, during the 1980s, all through the 1980s, we were writing, myself and Yasodanandan, for the Vedic Village Review, which was Nityananda's magazine. Krishna Kanta was reading that magazine, and he was agreeing with the principle, our idea, that, you know, we should not worship conditioned souls, we should worship a pure devotee only. And we had so many quotes that were used to emphasize that idea and support that idea. I also had written a booklet earlier, starting around 1984, called Our Living Guru. That booklet had a lot of quotes which were eventually used by Krishna Kanta. So Krishna Kanta was basically using our quotes and our citations and our arguments, and he was also calling us and writing us, so we were in contact. So in other words, he was using our ideas, and he thought the idea is good, but at the same time he didn't like our, you know, the other side of what we were doing, which was to expose these bogus, you know, conditioned soul gurus. So he thought that was unnecessary. We should just give a positive argument. You know, let's just worship the pure devotee. And the GBC, the gurus, will accept that. He thought they're all going to agree to that because, you know, he at the time thought, I mean, he was very naive. He just thought these guys are going to cave in and they're going to work with our idea. They've just misunderstood, you know, what Prabhupada had instructed and ordered. It was just some minor little technical thing that they didn't quite get. As soon as he showed them the right idea, they would accept the right idea, and that was his plan. His plan was, we're going to get the GBC to cave in, and they're going to become Ritviks. The GBC are going to change their designation. They're no longer going to be Acharyas. They're going to be Ritviks. And he was firmly convinced, as were his associates, that this was all going to happen in ISKCON, and it happened very quickly. I mean, Kamsahanta, who was Krishna Kanta's other helper, he kept saying, yeah, in 6 months, ISKCON will adopt this idea. So they were very, very, I guess you could say, overly ambitious. They thought, you know, this is a piece of cake. We're just going to walk in here and take over and fix all this. In other words, they were very naive. They didn't realize how motivated and duplicitous and devious these gurus were. So they were meeting with the GBC, Krishna Kanta, Adri Dharan, Yadu Raj. The leaders of the IRM were meeting with, like Hridayananda, Jayapataka, these kinds of people. And they were setting up, you know, a potential, you know, some sort of arrangement that they would work out things together and start negotiating some kind of a settlement between them. But the first thing the GBC said was, okay, wait a minute, you have to stop this guy Puranjana. You know, we're not going to negotiate with you as long as he is doing his writing and going on his campaign against us. So if you can stop this guy Puranjana, then we can go forward and negotiate further from there. So in one of my meetings with Adri Dharan and Krishna Kanta, they said, listen, we have a plan. We're going to send you to the Caribbean islands. You can just sit on the beach down there and drink a soda or whatever. We're going to set you up in a hotel down there. We're going to fly you there. We're going to pay for all your expenses. And you just have to go and, you know, keep quiet and quit writing, quit doing what you're doing, just relax, take a vacation. You know, and we need you to do that because, you know, the GBC isn't going to negotiate with us until you agree to do that. So naturally, I'm thinking, how is this going to work? You know, these guys are very dangerous. They're criminals. They've had people murdered, beaten, banned, all kinds of things. We're going to sit down and negotiate with them. We're going to just change their titles, and then everything's going to be fine. We're going to go to the mafia and put, you know, pope hats and bishop hats on the mafia leaders, and everything's going to be fine then. We're going to have a wonderful church. No, that's not going to work. These people are corrupt. They're criminals. They're dangerous people. And we're going to have to, try to get them out. We can't have criminals in charge of our religion. But the IRM thought, no, we're just going to, we're going to appease these criminals, give them a title, and then they're all going to cave in, and everything's going to be wonderful, and we're going to be working with these people. So this was doomed from the start. This was just not going to work, and that's what I told them. I said, you guys are dreaming in color. These guys are not going to accept a change in title, number one. But number two, they're not going to change what they're doing. They're exploiting the society. And that is not going to change no matter what title they have. So the IRM guys, they wanted me to go to the Caribbean and take a vacation. So right away I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm going to go to the Caribbean and I'm going to be dead. I'm going to go down there and I'm just going to get assassinated and disappeared and who knows what, because, once I'm out of the jurisdiction of the U.S. law enforcement, and, in the hands of who knows what kind of law enforcement they have down there, I'm going to be, disappeared. So I said, to me, this means the plan of the GBC gurus is to get rid of me. And the IRM are so foolish and naive, they think, yeah, that's a good idea. Puranjana should go to the Caribbean. And then, what if I disappear? Well, then the IRM would be happy. They think, yeah, we need to get rid of this guy. He's a headache because, Puranjana is just making waves, and he's destroying our big plan to make peace and have a big, friendly party with the bogus gurus. And we're all going to sit down and have a kumbaya party. So this was the basic flaw of the IRM. The, Krishna Kanta, Yadaraj, these people, and Adridan were inexperienced. They just had no experience dealing with the GBC gurus. They didn't know how devious these guys were. So it was a big problem right from the beginning with the IRM. So their idea was good. We should have a reform of ISKCON. The concept is good, but how to go about reforming ISKCON, that's always been, the problem that I've had with all my godbrothers, never mind the IRM. I've always gone forward with the idea we need to expose the bogus gurus and show, what kind of bad behavior they have, and this way people will understand they're not gurus. We'll contrast what they're doing with the behavior of a real guru, and then it'll be very easy. We can make a real easy argument to convince people that these gurus are bogus. Now, the timing of this couldn't have been worse for me personally, because I had just introduced the poison case. I was out in public saying that a certain clique inside the GBC guru clique had killed Prabhupada with poison. So I'm trying to paint the GBC gurus in a very bad light, and the IRM is trying to say, no, they're nice guys, they're good guys, we can work with them, and so on and so forth. So they wanted to compromise with the GBC gurus. I'm trying to put down a heavier hammer on the heads of the GBC gurus. At the same time, during that same time, I was putting together some of the seedling ideas for the Wendell Turley child molestation lawsuit. So, in other words, I'm going after the GBC on different issues, and the IRM wanted to backpedal and be friendly with the GBC on the same issues. So it didn't work, and one of the problems that later on manifested from this was that they did not use these arguments. So when the IRM was taken to court by the GBC gurus in India, which happened later on, they weren't using the right arguments. They weren't coming into court and saying, Your Honor, the GBC gurus are promoting the idea that child molesters and deviants and drug addicts are God's successors, are Krishna's successors, are the Vedic acharyas. If they had used my argument, if they had gone into court and said, Your Honor, these people say that child molesters and acharyas and Lord Krishna's successors are having illicit sex with men, women, and children. That's what they're saying. And we say that's wrong. Well, no court would have agreed with the GBC guru's side. We would have won the case easily. The Bangalore case versus Bombay case never would have happened. It would have been shut down within, 24 minutes in court. The judge would have said, excuse me, these guys are saying that Lord Krishna's successors are having sex with men, women, and children? Case dismissed. They don't have a case. They're out of here. Not only that, maybe we should investigate these bums at the same time. So if the IRM had used my argument, then they would have had a big hammer to use against the GBC, and they would have defeated the GBC in court right away in 97, 98, 99. All this would have ended way back then if they had used my arguments. But they said, oh, no, we're not going to do that. And so now it's too late. Now they're not able to introduce all these types of arguments into the court. So this was a big mistake. The good news, of course, is that they are starting to use these arguments, at least amongst their congregation and in the media and so on and so forth. They are coming out and using all of our arguments that the GBC gurus are bogus because they're exploiting the society, there's embezzling, there's molesting, there's murders, there's all kinds of problems going on. So they're finally using our arguments, but in terms of the court case, it's too little too late, which is unfortunate. But at the same time, it doesn't matter a whole lot to me. The truth is coming out now. Never mind, too little too late, maybe, but at least it's coming out now. So it's taken a long time to squeeze the toothpaste out of the tube, but it's finally coming out at this time. Meanwhile, Krishna Kanta, the leader of the IRM, is pretty much being abandoned and rejected by everybody because most people agree with me now that Prabhupada was poisoned and that we should use these heavier arguments. In fact, at this point, most of the people who are trying to reform ISKCON are on board with me using all of the arguments that I've been using all along. And Krishna Kanta has sort of had a wake-up, and he's even using a lot of our expose techniques right now himself. He now writes a Back to Prabhupada magazine, and in there he just recycles around stories that I wrote like 10, 15 years ago. He said, the GBC gurus have been engaged in illicit sex, the GBC gurus are committing crimes, the GBC gurus are implicated in murder, blah, blah, blah. In other words, he's just using all of the negative stories that I've used all along. He's now just borrowed all that. So he borrowed all the quotes from us in the first place about how the guru must be a pure devotee, which we got, of course, from Prabhupada in the first place. So he's using our philosophical and Siddhanta quotes, and now he's also using our, bashing technique against these gurus, that you have to bash them down and expose them. There's only a few holdouts now, at this point, who think it's not a good idea to bash these gurus. One of them is Narayan Das, Vishwakarma, Nathan Zakim. He's kind of like my arch enemy at this point in time because he still writes things like, we shouldn't bash the gurus are not the problem. The problem is what exactly? The problem is these gurus are out of control. That's all there is to it, and they're doing bad things, and they're having crimes committed. They're orchestrating criminal activity. They're bad people. They orchestrated child molestation. They orchestrated murders. They're bad. So we shouldn't bash them? Why not? So just to refresh, some people may not know the history of this, but I got the tapes, the 1977 tapes where Prabhupada complained about being poisoned. I got those when I was in Los Angeles in 1997. And most of that is in Hindi and Bengali. So I had that translated by a Bengali gentleman in Los Angeles. And so I was the first person to make transcripts of the poison tape and also just hand out tapes, the audio tapes. So I was handing out those tapes around Los Angeles Temple in 1997. So this was another, a problem I was having with the IRM. I'm just now, just starting this poison investigation, and they just want to shut that whole thing down. So obviously that's not something I was willing to do. But looking back on it, just think about it. They were telling me, even if Prabhupada was poisoned, so what, who cares, we shouldn't bring this issue forward. Even if Prabhupada had been murdered, we shouldn't disclose that. We should let the murderers get away with it. So this is the naive type of mentality that we've had to deal with in terms of all these crisis issues going on in ISKCON. Yes, even if there's molestation going on, don't worry about it, don't talk about it, it's going to make waves. Yes, even if Prabhupada was murdered, don't worry about it, it's going to make waves if we discuss it. So this is, I think this is what you would call definitely the symptoms of a brainwashed cult, There's all these problems going on, major duty criminal problems, including that the founder of the religion itself may have been murdered, and so what, who cares, don't worry about it. Now, at the time, also, Narayan Maharaj had been informed that I was going around saying Prabhupada had been poisoned, and he said, oh, this is crazy, this Puranjana guy is a nutcase, he's an offender, he's very dangerous, and so the GBC reacted very badly against, the poison issue. The IRM reacted against it. Narayan Maharaj acted against it. So everyone was basically against me at the beginning. They said, this is crazy, this is foolish, we shouldn't be discussing this is not going to go anywhere. And the reason they all said that was that they wanted to compromise and make a deal with the GBC Guru party. That is why they opposed me, because they were trying to sit down and play patty cakes with these guys. So I really don't know what to compare this to. If you think about it, like there's the battered woman syndrome. This woman has a boyfriend or husband who beats her up and mistreats her and doesn't allow her to, express herself, so many things. She's repressed. But she keeps thinking, I'm going to fix this guy. Tomorrow, next week, next year, he's going to get better. But he never gets better. So the GBC, they just basically bully people down, and then people sometimes foolishly think, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to meet with them, and the GBC gurus are going to be reasonable, and they're going to, accept a reasonable argument, and they're going to come down to earth and, start making sense and have, compassionate, kind dealings with others. But it just really never happens. Every time we turn around, there's more victims. There's more people being banned, more people being beaten, and sometimes people being killed. Now Indra was, mysteriously exploded in a gas cylinder explosion of some type. But a lot of people think this was not an accident. He was speaking out. He was on the verge of being kicked out of the Vrindavan temple. All of a sudden he dies mysteriously. So, a lot of people just basically don't trust the GBC gurus for good reason, because it seems like anyone who opposes them is repressed. So to think you're going to sit down, unless you also got some kind of a big stick to deal with them, it's just not going to work. You have to have, you have to put pressure on them. So the good news is more people are realizing that now. The Bangalore guys are finally coming out using our argument that these gurus are deviants. Krishna Kanta is using that argument. People everywhere are using these arguments. They're using, number one, our arguments, all the quotes that we assembled in the 1980s, that you have to worship a pure devotee. This is what Prabhupada says. There's no other way. If you want to go back to Godhead, you have to worship a person who is already in Godhead. That means a pure devotee. And that's all there is to it. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts, or, there's nothing to argue about there. The GBC gurus are clearly not on that level. So, therefore, they're not qualified to take the post of guru and, absorb other people's sins and take worship and have people offer their food to them and all these kinds of things. It's falling apart. It's collapsing at this point. So I guess you could say we were ahead of our time, because we said at the beginning, you got to use these heavy arguments. You've got to expose the usurping, the exploitation, the embezzlement, the misuse of devotees, the exploitation of women, the exploitation of children, all these things that have been going on. They have to be exposed. Now, I'd like to just really sum up real quickly what happened with the Wendell Churley lawsuit. What happened with that was the children of ISKCON were more and more committing suicide. And this was noted in a newsletter written by Pranada Dasi. Pranada is one of the ISKCON ladies in Alachua, Florida. She's married to Nagaraj. Nagaraj is one of the people who helps put together the Back to Godhead magazine and so on. So her newsletter was very hard-hitting. Actually, she was writing some really good stuff for a while. I mean, it fizzled out after a while, but at least for a time, she was, hitting the gurus pretty hard, and this was certainly an issue that was hitting them right square in the jaw. That the children, the victims of molestation in ISKCON, were starting to have a suicide problem, and this problem might have become an epidemic. So I was concerned, number one, for the lives of these children. I said, we can't have children dying. This is not acceptable. Simultaneously, I said, the long-range result is, let's say, more and more of these children commit suicide, then this is going to be headlines in the newspaper. We're going to have a big story that the children are killing themselves. And this will be the headlines of the New York Times. The New York Times newspaper will say, Hare Krishna cult, suicide, something like that. So we had to stop that for all kinds of reasons. So Prachitosh helped me. He contacted the Wendell Turley law firm. Wendell Turley agreed to take the case. So we, started, this was also in 1997 when we started just assembling affidavits. We were just collecting statements from these ex-students saying that they had been molested. We were going to stop this at, I think initially at like 500 people. But what happened was, very shortly, there was 1,000 children. 1,000 children signed on to this case. And more than 1,000 would have signed on, except they finally did cut it at 1,000. So just imagine. The Catholic Church, they have 2-3 victims every here and there. All of a sudden, we got 1,000 victims. More than 1,000, probably 2,000, in a very much smaller religion. So obviously this was an epidemic. So there was an epidemic of molestation, and there would have been an epidemic of suicide. So whatever people say about the Wendell Turley lawsuit, it did stop the suicides. The suicides almost stopped to nil. So, whether the case was good, bad, or ugly, it did the job. It did the job of saving these children from dying. Now, at that time, when I was right in the middle of negotiating the whole case, Sanat, Mukunda, and their cheerleader, Narayan Das, and Nathan Zakim, they all started saying, well, wait a minute, why save these children? These children should die. Yeah, let them all commit suicide. Not only that, the ones who don't commit suicide, we should kill them, chop them up, and feed them to dogs. And they wrote that to the court. They wrote to the court. They sent their letter saying that the children of ISKCON need to be killed, chopped up, and fed to dogs. They sent that to the court. When I'm in the middle of a very delicate negotiation with the lawyers, with the court, with the children, and everything else. So all that did was, it just put the kibosh on my negotiation. The court said, you know what, these children are now in danger, and we don't want this, me or anybody else contacting the children. They put a kind of a lid on the whole situation. So all that Sanat, Mukunda, and Narayan did was they just shut down my negotiation over the case. And then after that, they said, well, they didn't like the way the case came out. Well, okay, but you interfered with the case. Why did you interfere? Why didn't you allow me to negotiate? So this is like, I'm trying to fix a car. They go by and shoot a bazooka at the car blows into 1,000,000 pieces, and then they say, well, why didn't you fix the car? Well, because you came in and interfered with what I was doing. But anyway, the bottom line is nobody signed up for their idea. They said, let's kill these children. Nobody agreed. Everybody thought this is crazy. And it didn't go anywhere. So, but at the same time, they still think they did a good job. They still write and say, oh yeah, the Wendell Turley thing was a bad thing. It was bad that the suicides were stopped. They didn't like that. It was bad that the children were not killed. They wanted children to die. They said there will be a bloodbath of children. That is what they wanted. They wanted the blood of these children. So, however we handled the case, we didn't want to see the blood of children all over the walls of ISKCON. So I am amazed, really, that people are saying, well, Puranjana, you should have allowed the blood of the children to flow all over the walls of ISKCON. Why did you stop that? So this is the kind of nutty thing we are dealing with. But how did you guess the IRM guys, Krishna Kanta, these guys, they said, we don't like this either. Why are you doing this lawsuit? Let the children die. What is the problem? So there's, unfortunately, what this did was it convinced the court, it convinced Wendell Turley, it convinced a lot of people that there really is an anti-child psychology in ISKCON. Here's a guy trying to fix the situation, of children committing suicide, and everyone is opposing him. And everyone is like clapping their hands and cheering the children dying. It's just, so it confirmed to the court that there is an anti-child sentiment amongst a lot of the psychotic people who claim to be devotees of Krishna. Devotees of Krishna are not in favor of killing children. Nobody else is in favor of killing children, except, the Taliban. Somebody like the Taliban. If the children don't behave nicely, then the Taliban will kill the children. Well, how popular is the Taliban? Not very popular. So the idea that we should just kill the children because they don't like the religion, this is the Taliban idea. This was not Prabhupada's idea. And in fact, Prabhupada warned, if you don't treat these children nicely, they'll become alienated and they won't like the religion. So you got to be careful. So Prabhupada was not in favor of, forcing anything on these children, what to speak of, forcing abuse on these children. So in other words, nothing was done. I said there's a molestation problem early on in the early 1980s. I said there's a problem. Nothing was ever done. Finally, in 1997, it gets to the point where they're committing suicide. And again, I come forward and say, this is a crisis, this is a problem, and everybody, craps on my head and opposes that. Oh, you want to save the children? Why? So this shows that the devotees, so-called devotees of Krishna, have a long way to go just to come up to the platform of basic human level of sentiment. And I'm sad that I have to admit that's going on in my so-called religion. And I'm also sad that I have to report that Sanat, Mukunda, and Narayan and the IRM and these people were wrong. It was my job to save these children. I'm sorry, that was my job. I'm not going to let Prabhupada's children die if I can do something. That's just the way it is. But, the final thing I really want to say about the IRM is I want to give them at least some credit. They did spread the idea of worshiping Prabhupada in different places, and it was accepted because of their propaganda and their program, and we have to give them credit for that. The Prabhupada Nuga idea spreading in Russia and different places, and it's because of their publications and their work. At the same time, they should give credit to me. They got all their quotes from Prabhupada from me, and they got their whole idea of bashing down on these gurus from me. So they're using the techniques that I pioneered, and they don't want to give me any credit. And, and they still say I was wrong on the poison issue. I shouldn't have promoted that. Never mind that 99.9% of the Prabhupada Nugas accept the poison issue.